Hey guys, it is time for Bible. So in 2 Samuel chapter 19, if I were titling this chapter, it would be The Aftermath of the Battle. So we had been leading up to the battle of David versus Absalom, and we had the battle in chapter 18. Here in 19, it's the aftermath of the battle. So remember, Absalom had been killed by Joab, and David is mourning as we start this chapter. Chapter 19, verse 1, and Joab was told, "Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom." So David was David was obviously very sad that his son had been put to death, especially since he told Joab, "Don't do it," right? Specifically, nobody touch him, nobody touch him. Yet that Joab said, "I don't care, I'm going to put him to death," and it may have been, sorry, it may have been the correct decision. Yet Joab needed to submit to authority and listen to David. So David is sitting here just mourning and mourning for Absalom. Verse 2, so the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, the king is grieved for his son, and the people stole back into the city that day as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. It's a really interesting scenario here, and it's a really difficult one. It's a really tricky one. Because what's happening here is two very justified things. The people are coming back from winning in battle. And it's very important to, when you come back from battle and winning, that they have a celebration. They're like a victory. Otherwise, the people won't feel like they accomplished anything. They'll feel like they lost. And it's very important to have a celebration. Yet, it's also understandable that when David's son died, he's going to mourn. He's going to be sad. But we see here the effects of his mourning and the effects of his sadness. In verse 4, the king has his face covered, and the king cried out with a loud voice, "O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son." He's just crying, screaming about it. And nobody really feels. It would be like, while he's crying and screaming and weeping, the leader, their leader, nobody would be like, "Hey, this is a great day, this is a great day." Everybody's kind of like, has their heads down, and they're somber. And Joab comes, and remember, we've talked about Joab before. Joab doesn't care who you are, he's going to tell you what he thinks. Joab came into the house of the king and said, "Today you've disgraced all your servants who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and daughters, and the lives of your wives and concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants, for today and so basically Joab is saying, and I'll read the rest of it in a second, Joab is saying, David, you got to stop. You have to stop the mourning, because you're making the people feel like, they didn't have a victory. You're making them feel like they're making them feel bad, like they did something wrong. And so it brings up a really tricky concept about mourning. Is mourning for someone who dies or something like that wrong? No, that's okay. When you're sad, when someone dies, it's okay to be sad. It's understandable to be sad. It's part of life. God's sad. When we're sad, God's sad, and it's okay. And it's healthy. It's a healthy thing. If you have a loved one, a grandparent, or somebody die, it's a healthy thing to cry and weep because you miss them. It's okay. You shouldn't pretend that you don't feel that way. We should never be pressured to pretend we don't have feelings. That's not right. You shouldn't be that way. However, certain things happen when you're in a position of leadership. I've been talking about being in leadership and being in authority the last couple of weeks. Certain things happen when you're in authority and leadership. You give up certain privileges. If my kids are, let's say they get really sad about something, okay, and they just don't feel like getting out of bed for the day, they could stay in bed and it'll be okay. If I and Mrs. Hanley feel sad and we just don't feel like getting out of bed, too bad. We got to get out of bed because our kids need food. We got to make them food. We got to get them dressed. We got to do everything. When you're a parent, it doesn't matter what you feel like. You still need to take care of your children. But when you're a child and you don't have responsibility, you don't have to worry about that. If you don't feel good, you can just lay in bed. You know how many times I'd love to lay in bed until like 9 o'clock or something, but you can't. Because you're a parent, and we got to take care of kids, and we have responsibilities. So the king, he was mourning and weeping and everything, and expressing understandable things. But the thing is, he's in a position of leadership and authority, so he has to understand those things come first. It's like back when we were talking about back when he left Jerusalem. Do you remember? He actually did it the right way that time. He They fled. They did okay. What do we need to do? They got out of there. They got out of there quickly. He reassessed the situation. Okay, you do this. He says to Zadok and Abiathar, I want you guys to go back and be spies. Hushai, I want you to go back and be sabotage, do espionage and sabotage the plans. Jonathan and what was his name? What was the guy's other son's name? Ahimaaz, I believe. Jonathan and Ahimaaz, you guys will be running back and forth telling me information. And he did, okay, you go this, you do this, you do that, you do that. And then they all went. And then he was like, okay, now it's time to mourn. And he started crying, weeping because Absalom had rebelled against him. Well, now that Absalom is dead, he doesn't have that ability because he's just overwhelmed with emotion. David's a very, very emotional person. He has the highest of heights of joy and just the deepest depths of sadness. And he's very emotional about Absalom dying. But the problem is he's so emotional that he shirks off his leadership. He gets rid of his leadership. He doesn't even worry about it. He doesn't think about the others around him. But again, that's the tricky part about being a leader, being in charge. You have to think about others before yourself. If you're not in charge of anybody, if you're just by yourself, you don't have to think about anybody. You could be sad when you want and not worry about it. But when you're in a leadership position, you have to think about other people first. And right now, him mourning, not saying he shouldn't mourn, but him mourning is negatively affecting everyone around him. So the key is, what should be happening is he needs to stop mourning until he's by himself. Then he can pour out his heart for Absalom. And again, this is not the case for everybody. It's not the case that, it's not the case that whenever somebody dies, like everybody's expected to be that way. No, that's not the case. But let me give you an example. Let's say I'm very, very sad about stuff. And this has happened before. I've been very sad about things that happen in my life. Maybe something bad happens to me or whatever, and I'm upset about it. If I come to church in the morning and I go do worship, if I lead worship, I can't get up there and be like, good morning, everybody. It's time to worship God. Are you guys ready to worship? All right, let's worship God. Praise the Lord, for you are good. You are great. Like, I can't do that. I have to put aside my sadness, put aside my worry, put aside my stress, get rid of it. I have to compartmentalize it, say, I will deal with you. You stress, anxiety, sadness, whatever. I'm going to take you, put you aside for now. And you don't put it aside forever because that's not healthy. But you put it aside for now and say, take a deep breath. Okay, I need to take care of this. I need to worship God. I need to praise Him because it doesn't matter what you're going through. He still was worthy to be praised. And then afterward, when I have time alone, I can readdress these things. Okay. And then bring them before the Lord and say, God, please help me deal with these things. That's the proper way to do it. And Job even brings up to him, he says in verse 6? Yeah, 6. He goes, for today I perceive that if Absalom had lived and all of us had died, that it would have perceived you well. David was so over the top with his mourning that Job's like, I bet you would be happier than this if all the rest of us died and Absalom lived. I bet you wouldn't be this sad. I bet you'd be happier if that happened. And how crazy is that, David? Absalom was trying to kill you. And he says to him, now, and he actually commands David what to do, which is pretty incredible. He goes, now therefore arise, go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. He's telling David, he's apprising him of the situation. He's saying, David, you're just assuming everything's going to be hunky-dory and back with everything, and everything's going to be okay. He goes, you got to win these people back. Because think of it, a lot of the people sided with Absalom. He had an army of 20,000 guys. A lot of the people sided with Absalom. He goes, you got to win them back. He goes, go out and comfort them. He goes, and that will, and they won't, and if you don't, they won't stay with you, and that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you, all up till now. And so the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told the people, there's the king sitting in the gate. So people were like, oh, excited, oh, the king's coming out, and they saw him. And so meanwhile, verse 9, it says, meanwhile, it's going on throughout all of Israel. There was a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel. saying, "The king has saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivers from the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, who we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now, therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?" So basically, they're all disputing back and forth about what should happen. And they're like, well, we got rid of David and we put Absalom as king, but that didn't work out because he died. And so he's not king anymore. I mean, should we bring David? Yeah, I think we should bring David. I don't know if we should bring David back. They're like debating with it. So King David kind of eases their minds a bit, and he sent Zadok and Abiathar, the priest, to the people of Judah and try to convince them to put David back. And including in verse 13, he takes Amasa. Remember, Amasa was one of Absalom's cousins. He's a nephew of David, and Joab's another nephew. Remember, Joab and Amasa are both different cousins from different parents, and David says, "I'm going to take Joab out as commander of the army. I'm going to put Amasa in, and hopefully that will sway the people." And that swayed the hearts of Judah, with Zadok and Abiathar, saying good things about David, and him doing that. Judah was like, okay, fine, we will side with the king again. And so meanwhile, now verse 16, we see somebody come back, a guy named Shimei. If you don't remember who he is, he's the guy in the previous chapter, a couple chapters ago. He's the guy that when David was walking out of Jerusalem, he was throwing rocks at David and cursing him. And remember, he was saying, "Curse you! This is what you deserve. This is what you get for taking out, Saul out of battle. God is going to make sure you get what's yours." And you're probably saying, "You're going to die in battle, this and that." Now he's saying a different tune, though, because now he thought Absalom was the rightful heir to the throne. David was going to die. Now Absalom's gone and David's back, and he comes a bit more humbly, and so he hurried and came down with the men of Judah in verse 16. In verse 17, there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, we're going to deal with Ziba in a second. So Shimei and Ziba, you remember Ziba was the servant of Mephibosheth, and Ziba had said Mephibosheth had stayed in Jerusalem with Absalom. But anyway, so Shimei and Ziba both come, and they went before the king. And Shimei fell down before the king when he crossed the Jordan. And Shimei says to the king in verse 19, "Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me. Remember what wrong your servant did the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. The king should take it to heart, for I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my lord." So he basically says, "I know I did wrong. Please just forget all the wrong I did. I'm very, very sorry. I'm the very first one from the tribe of Joseph, which is there are two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, that make up the two tribes that make up Joseph's lineage." And he said, "I'm the very first one here to congratulate my king, make you my king, and I'm very sorry." It's kind of like one of those things where, like, oh yeah, he's very strong. When David looks like he's down and out, he's like a fair weather fan. When David looks like he's down and out, he's stepping on him. But as soon as David looks like he's back, he's like, "Oh, I want to be your friend." And so I'll give you, what do you think? Do you think David's going to forgive him, or do you think he's not going to forgive him? What do you know about David? Well, if you know David well, you know he's going to forgive him. So Abishai, and it's funny, think about Abishai is beside David all these times. When they snuck into the camp at night, Abishai, his nephew, remember this is Joab's brother, Abishai says, "Come on, David, let me kill King Saul. I won't have to do it a second time. Just let me put the spear through him." And David says no. And Abishai also had asked to kill Shimei, and David said no. And now again, he's saying, "Hi, David, he's coming back and he's pleading with you. Please let me kill him. He cursed you, the Lord's anointed. Can I kill him?" He's kind of probably bringing up to David, "Hey, you said people cursing the Lord's anointed back when it was Saul or Ishbosheth. They should be put to death. You're the Lord's anointed right now. Can we put him to death?" But David says, "He shall not die." He's merciful to Shimei, that's what David is. He's humble and merciful. He accepts his apology. Verse 24, and now we see Mephibosheth show up. And so Mephibosheth shows up, and remember what Ziba had said to him before, that he had sided with Absalom. And remember, Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son, and David's really, really puzzled by this, because David had welcomed him into his house. He let him eat at his table. He gave him his Saul's land back. He gave him everything. he's like, I feel like I've been so nice to him. I wonder why he sided with Absalom. This is one of the ones that made him upset. But he sees Mephibosheth coming in, and it says he hasn't trimmed his beard, he hasn't washed, he hasn't bathed since the day that David left Jerusalem, which means he was in mourning. So what Ziba had said about Mephibosheth was a lie. He says to Mephibosheth, David says to Mephibosheth, why didn't you go with me to Jerusalem? And Mephibosheth answers back, my lord the king, my servant Ziba deceived me. For I said, I will saddle a donkey for myself that I may ride on and go to the king. Because I'm sorry, Ziba said that. Ziba said, Mephibosheth, you stay here, because remember, Mephibosheth had broken legs. His legs were lame. He couldn't walk. Ziba said, you stay here, Mephibosheth. I'm going to go to the king for you and bring the message that you are on his side and you're siding with him. But you're staying here because your legs are broken. And Mephibosheth trusted him. And so, remember, Ziba came to David and said, and David was like, where's Mephibosheth? And Ziba's like, he sided with Absalom. I'm so sorry, you king. And David was mad. And he said, fine, you can have all his land. So Mephibosheth is telling him, no, he lied about me. He slandered me, verse 27, me to the Lord, the king. My Lord the king is like the angel of God, therefore do what is good in your eyes. Mephibosheth, David's humility rubs off on Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, like, you know what, he lied about me, but I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. And so, he said, and Mephibosheth says, for all my father's house were dead men before my lord the king, yet you set your servant among those who eat at your table. Therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king? He brings up, basically, he said, any other king who comes to the throne would have put me to death. He goes, I would have died years ago if any other king had been put to the throne. So he's like, the fact that I'm still alive right now, I view as an absolute gift. Yet, not only that, you not only didn't kill me, but you brought me into your house and treated me like, you gave me land, you treated me like one of your own, you treated me like a member of your family. And so he goes, what right do I have to be upset about anything? And so David's idea was, all right, let's have you and Ziba divide the land. So he tries to somehow, he can't go back on his, because he promised that he would give the land to Ziba. So he tries to somehow go, okay, how can I not go back on my promise? He said, I'll give him half. Okay, that way there, he still is getting the land, but I'm also keeping some from Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth answers in verse 30. He goes, rather, let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back to peace in his own house. Mephibosheth says, I don't care. Let him have it. He's conspiring and being, backhanded enough that he wants it. Just let him keep it. He said, I don't care. All I want is, I'm just so happy that you're back, David. I want to do whatever I can to just be with you again and be at the palace with you. That's good enough for me. And so he insists that Ziba just keep the land. And so now in verse 31, David, verse 31 through 39, I'm not going to read each one, but he goes through Barzillai, and he tells this guy named Barzillai he wants to reward him because Barzillai gave him food and provisions while he was out in the wilderness, because Barzillai is a very rich man, but he's also elderly. But and David invites him to Jerusalem, but Barzillai is like, I'm an old man. I won't make it to Jerusalem. So I don't want to burden you. I don't want to burden you with bringing me there. And David wants to repay him. And David's like, I'm trying to repay you. He goes, don't worry about it. Just go. I can't make it to Jerusalem. And David's like, I want to do something. I want to do something for you. And he insists. And so Barzillai finally says, okay, if you want to do something for me, you can reward my son. Give my son my reward. And so David did, and blessed him and returned. And the last couple of verses here, verse 40, he went on to Gilgal, and the guy's son, Barzillai's son, Chimham, went with him. And the people of Judah escorted the king and half the people of Israel. And they said, and so the people of Israel actually got upset in verse 41, and they said to them, because the people of Judah kind of brought David across the Jordan into Judah as like the official, bringing him back. And the people of Israel are like, how dare you guys? What is it of you to bring him back. It's not, why is it your place? And so the northern tribes felt they had this like big ceremony bringing David back, and the northern tribes felt like they were excluded. They're like, he's our king too. Why didn't you invite us? Um, and Judah was like, he's from Judah. That's why because David is of the tribe of Judah, and they said, he's from our tribe, and we wanted to honor him, and so Judah basically was like, it's our choice, we're going to honor him, too bad. And so we see the very first inklings of a rivalry between Judah and the northern tribes. They're kind of getting aggravated. Judah is like, we can do what we want with King David, and the northern tribes are like, well, no, we are aggravated with that. And we want to be just as much part of that as as you guys are. So we see this first little rivalry come up between the northern tribes and Judah, and that will play more later. All right, so that's your chapter 19 for today.